Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving into hurricane season this time, but we're going deeper than just, boarding up the windows.
Right. We're talking about the science, the surprises, the things about hurricanes that, well,
That make you go, whoa, I didn't know that.
exactly. And we've got some really fascinating stuff to work with today. Dr. Kiran Bhattia's research gives us that solid academic background, but we're also going to bring in some very specific South Florida insights.
Perfect combo, especially if you live anywhere that's, well, hurricane prone. So Dr. Bhatia starts with, oh, he starts at the very beginning, right? What are hurricanes?
And it seems simple, but
It's not, is it?
not at all. It gets really interesting because a lot of it comes down to location, location, location.
Right.
What we call a hurricane here in the Atlantic, Eastern
Yeah.
Pacific.
Yeah.
Those same storms, they're called cyclones in the Southwest Pacific and Indian Oceans.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got typhoons over the Northwest Pacific.
So it's like same storm, different outfit, but it's got to be more than just what we call them, right?
Oh, absolutely. The different names, they actually reflect how these storms behave, how they form based on location.
Yeah.
The Pacific Ocean, for instance, tends to have, well, larger, more intense storms. That's your typhoons. And that all comes down to things like geography and wind patterns in that part of the world.
Makes sense. And speaking of location, get this. Our South Florida listeners, get ready to have your minds blown. October actually sees more hurricane strikes than September.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild? It feels completely backwards.
It's true, though. You see, while a lot of folks think September is peak hurricane season, for you all in South Florida, it's actually October.
Why is that?
Water temperature. The waters off the coast, they're at their warmest in October. And warm water. That is basically jet fuel for hurricanes. And that's where, understanding hurricane season for where you are is so important. Dr. Bhatia really emphasizes this. A storm's impact, it's not just about size.
Right. Like I used to think, okay, bigger hurricane, bigger problem. But then we had that category 1 just kind of park itself over us last year. Dumped rain for days. And the flooding.
Exactly. It's about so much more than just the category. You've got the hurricane's path, how fast it's moving, the tides, even just the lay of the land where it hits.
Makes you think about that whole cone of uncertainty differently, huh? For our listeners, imagine like you're looking at a map and there's this cone around the predicted path of the hurricane.
Like a funnel, yeah. But on its side.
And the cone, it gets wider, right, the further out the prediction goes.
Showing how that uncertainty grows over time. Like the further out we try to predict, the less certain we are.
And here's the kicker that Dr. Bhatia points out. There's a 1 in 3 chance the hurricane center will be outside that cone completely. 1 in 3. I did not realize it was that high.
Yeah, it's a probability field, really.
Yeah.
Not a guarantee. That's why you can't just rely on the cone alone. And this is where it gets even more interesting because Dr. Bhattia's research, it doesn't just stop at, wind and rain.
Oh, right. Because hurricanes can come with a whole grab bag of other hazards, things people might not even think about. Like, did you know hurricanes can cause tornadoes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. Tornadoes, they're actually a surprisingly common side effect of hurricanes, especially in those outer rain bands. Think about it. You've got this massive rotating storm system. Perfect recipe for spinning off a few tornadoes.
And speaking of those lesser-known hurricane hazards, we got to talk storm surge. Dr. Bhatia calls it a silent killer, and I think that's really spot on.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most dangerous parts of a hurricane. We hear so much about wind speeds and categories, but honestly, storm surge, it's often what causes the most damage in the end.
It's like Hurricane Katrina. It really showed everybody how devastating storm surge can be.
Right, and I think that's why it's so important to really understand your local risk. You can't just go off the general hurricane season advice. Take it a step further. What's your specific location? Are you near the coast? What about a river? Are you in a low-lying area?
Right, it's not just about being in a hurricane zone, it's knowing what your vulnerabilities are. And hey, if any of this has got you thinking, man, I want to learn more, we highly recommend checking out Dr. Bhatia's full Understanding Hurricanes resource. We'll link it in our show notes.
It's really, really good stuff.
So as we wrap up our hurricane deep dive, I want to come back to that surprising fact about October being prime time for hurricanes in South Florida. I feel like that just drives home how important it is to really understand the specifics of where you live.
Absolutely. Don't just go through the motions with your hurricane prep. Know what you're up against. And here's a little something to think about. Maybe do some research on your own. What's the one thing about hurricanes that still makes you go, huh, I never knew that? You never know when that knowledge could come in handy. Stay safe out there.
Thanks for joining us for this hurricane deep dive, everyone. And remember, the best way to weather any storm is to be prepared. Catch you next time.